maybe mainline the fact that the world has become very strange. The world, if you like, has become fictional. And you may have noticed how strange things are recently. And that ordinary life, so-called ordinary life, seems less and less ordinary, thus making it the proper subject for the novel. Because again, in the last 10 years that I've been living in the United States, it felt as if through the surface of what was called ordinary life, there would burst out these curious, surrealist growths, which we came to call bushes. And we had to somehow make sense of those. They seemed much stranger than anything that we could reasonably have been expected. So that this, because I'm reminded that the great definitions of surrealism by André Breton and others had not to do with fantasy. They had not to do with an escape from reality. They had to do with, as Breton described it, that using the techniques of the surreal to strip away the veneer of habit which dulled our perception of the world, and to show us the world again as strange and rich and extraordinary as it truly is. These days, it seems you don't have to work very hard to demonstrate the surrealism of the world. I mean, if you only take the case of money in the last 12 months, you notice the complete, one day there were banks, the next day there were not banks. It seemed to happen more or less overnight, and now it seems, once again, there might be banks. Whether we trust them or not is another matter. Personally, my money's under the mattress. The banks, vanished and then reappeared. In other cases of money, such as the notorious case of the American swindler Bernard Madoff, billions disappeared and did not reappear. So the ability of money to dematerialize has been an interesting new realization. We oddly believed that once money existed, it existed. This is not so. And as you see, the ordinary resources of journalism are inadequate to deal with a world as fantastic as this. In fact, it seems to me that ordinary life itself is the genuine fiction. Life is not ordinary. If we look around the world these days, a world of child soldiers and Russian oligarchs and mass murderers of the age of 16 and stealers of children and Roger Federer losing tennis games, we see that the world is absolutely without explanation. And even if you look at behind the doors of family life, we all pretend that family life is something that we like to call normal. And when people ask us how things are in our families, we say, everything's fine, nothing happening really, it's perfectly ordinary. Whereas actually we know, behind the locked doors of the family, that it's hell in there. And that the real life of a family is anything but humdrum and everyday. It's explosive, bizarre, ugly, sometimes, of course, beautiful. Let me not spoil the argument. I found when people don't like my books, they have a tendency to say that the families in them are exaggerated and unbelievable. Whereas when people do like my books, they have a tendency to say that they're just like my family. And I obviously lean towards that description. So it seems to me that maybe only the habits of literature, and in particular surrealist literature, can in fact handle the world in which we now live and offer versions of it which feel truthful. The critic Randall Jarrell once described a novel as a long piece of writing that has something wrong with it. And it seems to me that you can also say that about the world. A large enterprise with something wrong with it. And maybe therefore, novel is the best, is flawed in the same way as the world is flawed, and makes it a useful tool with which to regard it. mentioned in the introduction, I studied history, not literature. I've always been very grateful for this. It allowed me to avoid becoming a critic. I'll leave that to you. But it did also shape very much the way in which I've subsequently worked, because the great thing that history, the study of history, encourages you to ask all the time is what is the nature of human life, and how do great events of the world relate to the ordinary lives of individuals. I had a wonderful history scholar, tutor at Cambridge, who sadly didn't produce as many books as he should have because of his alcoholism. But he was a really genuinely brilliant historian, and he said to me a thing once which I've never forgotten and seems to me as useful for the practice of literature as the study of history. He said, you should never write history until you can hear the people speak. He said, if you can't hear them speak, you don't know enough about them and you can't tell their story. The subject of spoken language, of the way in which people actually express themselves as a way of understanding who they are, clearly is not just a matter for the study of history, it's obviously crucial to the practice of literature. In my case, the question of language has always been central, largely, not only because, but because English is not my first language. English is not my mother tongue. My mother tongue was Urdu. And if you grew up, as I did, in the city of Bombay, the number of languages around you was quite large. I mean, to put it at its very simplest, the national language was Hindi, my mother tongue was Urdu, the regional languages were Gujarati and Marathi, and I went to an English-speaking school. So that's 5, just before you even get going. I mean, after that, of course, because Bombay is such a magnet, such an economic magnet, people come there from all over India. And so really, in its streets, you can hear not just those languages, but all the languages of India. And if you're going to exist in such a city, you cannot afford to only speak one language. You must speak more than one, and what people, in fact, do is to speak more than one language simultaneously. So that sentences can be in one language but incorporate vocabulary from another language, or sometimes more than one language. And this particular mixed up language of Bombay, the slang of Bombay, Bombaya, is a matter of wonder and laughter to people from other parts of India, but is of course an extraordinary gift to a writer, because it encourages you, or encouraged me, to be playful with language and to learn ways in which languages talk to each other and how they can incorporate each other, and how they can work together literally even at the level of the sentence. If you then set out to be a writer, you of course unfortunately have to write in one language at a time. Otherwise nobody can read you. And that would be a disadvantage. But it always became, for me, was at the beginning and still is interesting, to find a way of writing English which in some way incorporates that other idea, that other polyglot idea. To make English sound like many languages at once, to do what James Joyce wanted to do, which was to liberate English from the control of the English. Something which has happened, after all, in sport. All the sports the English invented are now played better by other people. And the English, as we know, invented almost all the sports in the world. Football, cricket, everything, hockey, rugby football, etc. And none of them are they now very good. Well, football maybe. You'll soon see.